Beef. Time for number 35 in my countdown of my 50 biggest beefs. And coming in at number 35 is none other than Mitch Albom, the celebrated book writer, newspaper columnist in Detroit. Mitch Albom, Beef 35. So Mitch Albom and I go all the way back to 1992 when I came to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to cover the Fab Five basketball team. Mitch Albom in 1992 was the biggest sports writer going. And this is, for some of you young folks, you don't even know what a big-time sports writer is because you never experienced, particularly a newspaper person, because they've destroyed that whole industry. But at this time, nobody in the sports writing world, no one in sports media was any bigger than Mitch Albom. He was winning all the journalism awards, all the best sports columnists virtually every year. Mitch Albom, greatest sports columnist every year. He's the gold standard. And I have to admit, I was not a big fan of Mitch Albom. Didn't write in my style. I thought he was very inauthentic. I thought he was very flowery. I thought he was about creating a narrative and, telling sappy, feel-good stories. And so long before I ever called Stephen A. Smith Stephen A. Myth, long before that, I was calling Mitch Albom Myth Albom. Because that's all you find in corporate celebrated media. You just find a bunch of myth writers. You find a bunch of people that write hagiographies. Hagiographies are these butt-kissing stories people write about certain subjects or whatever. And Mitch Albom was the king. Mitch Albom and probably Joe Posnanski probably have the most newspaper columns hung up in somebody's basement of any sports writer in history because, they could make any sports figure, they could make any of them sound like Ernest Hemingway and come off like they're Mother Teresa and the greatest human beings on the planet, and they spend their whole life saving children. So again, Mitch Albom is covering the Fab Five, or as a columnist. At the same time, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, covering the Fab Five as a beat reporter and occasionally writing columns. And again, Mitch is at the top of the profession, and he writes columns in a way that I don't really respect. I come from a Mike Royko background, and being a columnist meant about writing your opinion, being humorous, and writing your opinion. Mitch Albom specialized in writing narratives. He would, and this is back before TV was so pervasive and the internet was so pervasive, and so he would go write a story. If he wrote about the Lions, he would spend a bunch of time painting the scene about what it looked like inside the locker room after Barry Sanders ran for 200 yards. Barry's in one corner and he's sweaty and his teammates are coming by. He'd tell all that stuff because at that time, people didn't have the kind of access and we didn't know what was going on in the locker room, or sports fans didn't. And so he would spend all his time painting the scene. I would spend all my time telling you, here's what you should think about this game. Here's what you should think about this athlete. So our styles didn't really mix. And then just for those of you that, again, if you're struggling to connect the dots, maybe you don't know Mitch Albom as a sports writer. Maybe you know him as the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, one of the most best-selling books in American recent history. Tuesdays with Morrie is a Mitch Albom special. He's got a source, this guy Morrie, who's dying and in the hospital. That gives, and Mitch is visiting him every Tuesday, allegedly. That gives Mitch license. Again, you're writing about someone who is dead and who you are expecting to die. So when someone's dead or expected to die, you have license to virtually attribute anything to them. Who's going to second guess it? Of course, Maury is as wise a person as you've ever heard of in the planet. And he's not there to say, well, Mitch, actually, you took me out of context. I didn't say this or I didn't say that. But that's neither here nor there. That just gives you a little bit of flavor, a taste, a sense of what type of writing Mitch Albom specialized in. And he got crossways with me writing about the Fab Five because shortly after their sophomore year, Mitch wrote a book called Fab Five, and it was about the Michigan basketball team. And in that book, he told a story about Chris Webber. And he told the story that Chris Webber went to a McDonald's and couldn't afford McDonald's, despite generating all of this money for the University of Michigan. Chris Webber couldn't even afford a Big Mac and a double cheeseburger. Oh, the horror. Oh my God, this 6'9", 235-pound basketball phenom, he can't even afford a Big Mac and a large order of fries. This is in the book. And I'm reading it and I'm going, are you kidding me, Mitch? Because Mitch Albom covered the team and was there at practices just like I was. And Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, and Juwan Howard, and maybe Jimmy King, but I know for sure those three, drove up to practice every day in a $40,000 SUV, brand new, right off the showroom floor. We'd watch this with our own eyes. Again, because I was around the same age as these guys. I went to Chris Webber's apartment in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and played video games with him one day. Apartment was plush. Now, I'm trying to think of, probably at that time, this is 1992, 93, I think I'm making $45,000 a year from the Ann Arbor News, maybe 50, I can't remember. I'm living a good life for a young kid. I had a nice apartment in Ypsilanti, Michigan, right outside of Ann Arbor. Chris Webber's apartment was plush, had everything. Kitchen was stocked. We sat and played video games. I mean, just a really nice apartment. Probably, I would say, it looked like an apartment that like somebody making $80,000 a year would have. Again, this is 1992. That's a nice chunk of change for young people. Driving a nice SUV, plush apartment. And Mitch Albom is writing in a book that this man can't afford McDonald's. And I'm like, stop it, cut it out. And that's when I started calling him Myth Albom. And that's when I wrote a column just questioning his Fab Five book and why are we trying to pretend like these guys were running around Ann Arbor, Michigan starving. Are you kidding me? I forget the name of the pizza place, but they could go eat anywhere in town for free. They owned Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was a joke. And that's why I started calling him Myth Albom. In later years, Mitch got busted for writing a story, I think about the Michigan State basketball team, where he filed a column early and put all these information in there before the events actually happened and gotten a bit of controversy. I was proven right for calling him Myth Albom. And I gotta give Mitch credit. Mitch always dealt with me and tolerated me and didn't let his bitterness. We used to appear on the sports reporters in later years without incident or problem. Wasn't Mitch's favorite person, but again, Mitch has made so much money and had so much success. He didn't engage. And plus he knew he couldn't win because at some point people realized like, oh man, Whitlock's a brawler. And I'm not really a brawler. So anyway, that's my feud, that's my beef with Mitch Albom. And I'd have to say it's pretty much one-sided. I beef with him, he leaves me alone.